evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. As we continue on with my end of the year list for 2021. So far, we've taken a look at the consensus top 50 list for albumoftheyear.org. We've looked at my top 50 songs of 2021, and we've gone over my honorable mentions and my honorable mentions, as well as albums 50 to 41 of my top 50 list. So now we are here with the second part of my top 50 list, going over albums 40 to 31. Two main ground rules. Again, I am looking at albums, not songs. If you want to check out my favorite songs, you can check out the top 50 songs of 2021 on here, but great songs don't necessarily make a great album. A more cohesive album is what makes it onto my list. And second, and most importantly, if you don't see your favorite album, it could be one of a few things. One, it might be in my honorable mentions or my honorable mentions. Two, it might be in albums 50 to 41. It might even be higher on this list. Or I may have not gotten a chance to listen to it, because even though I listened to 230 albums last year, there's still a lot of albums I didn't get to check out. So don't fret if you don't see your favorite album. That just means it might just not make it my list, or it might be even higher. We'll see. All right, let's start off with number 40, and that is Spiritbox with Eternal Blue. I listened to this first on recommendation from my brother, and at first I didn't really see the appeal. I'm going to be honest though, I didn't really listen to it with headphones the first time around. So I was first saying, hey, this is good, but Amy Lee's a much better singer, and so on and so forth. And how wrong I was after the next few listens. This album's really, really solid. It is the best metalcore album that I heard all year. Courtney LaPlante is slowly becoming one of my favorite singers in metal, because she has a phenomenal singing voice and a crazy, crazy growl and scream. It is awesome, and it makes for a lot of really killer songs on this album. Sunkiller, a really atmospheric and eerie song, especially when you get to the end part when she's singing Sunkiller, Sing Me to Sleep. Or I'm sorry, not singing, screaming that. Hurt You, hell of a hard rock-ish song. Yellow Jacket with Sam Carter has these really interesting glitch ideas that honestly remind me of Code Orange. The Summit is a killer hard rock song, one of my favorite songs on the album. I've really, really enjoyed Holy Roller as a song. It's kind of weird, and honestly, be careful when you watch the music video, because that is a mindfuck of a music video, but it has a really cool vibe. And there's also just some really good hard rock and metal songs like Eternal Blue, We Live in a Strange World, as well as Circle With Me. All in all, really solid. I will say sometimes it gets a little bit too similar at times, but Courtney does a phenomenal job through and through. And as a debut album, it already got killer reviews, so we'll see where they can go from here. All right, number 39, we have Turnstile with Glow On. Another album at first that I listened to without headphones and didn't see the appeal of. But man, for a 35-minute album, this is killer. And honestly, one of my favorite pop, punk, hardcore punk albums this year. It's honestly because of it has some really catchy melodies, but also there's some really interesting production. It kind of reminds me at times of, say, like Thundercat, or in a weird way Mac DeMarco, in terms of its zaniness, in terms of like electronic ideas with the punk rock. Most of these songs are just hard hitting from start to back. Mystery, Blackout, Don't Play just hit you over the head with its ferocity at times. And then you got Endless, that I absolutely love. Yeah, just chorus works so well. Fly Again, a little bit more reserved, but has great power there. Wild World, Dance Off is a lot of fun. Dance Off is so much fun. Front to back, there's just a lot of really great and just catchy songs on here. I've heard other people not necessarily like it as much and just can't get into it, which I totally understand. But for me, this was a lot of fun, and the most fun that I have of a punk album all year. Number 38, we have Wheel with Resident Human. This is Tool worship at its finest. If you close your eyes, you probably would hear this being Tool and wondering when they had dropped a new album. This satiates my hunger for a new Tool or Perfect Circle album just because the use of math is killer. The riffs are basically not necessarily Tool ripoffs, but Tool homages. And just from start to back, you get a lot of just really killer work. I will say, though, the lyrics aren't as super interesting as, say, Tool. And there are some parts where the lead vocalist feels a little bit thin when compared to a Maynard James Keenan. But still, overall, really solid work. Dissipating, hell of a way of opening up that album. Movement just has so much energy, especially on that bass line. And Resident Human is an apt title track. So if you've been wanting some more Tool in your life, check this band out. Their earlier work is also really good as well. Number 37, we have Volbeat with Servant of the Mind. Yes, I know what people are going to say. Isn't this just dad metal? Sure, if you really want to say that, go for it. That's just another word for being very catchy. And honest, there's a lot of really catchy stuff from Volbeat. I've really liked Volbeat over the years. Yeah, they kind of have that mold that is kind of tongue-in-cheek metal in terms of like, yeah, it's just what normies will listen to. But this is still a fun album. There's a lot of really good stuff on here. And I just like the interplay with the idea of, it's kind of cliche, the devil and rock music and stuff like that, but they kind of take this to the next level. Like a lot of the lyrical themes on here is about being a servant to the devil and finding beauty in the hellscape. And I just find it super cool. Temple of Ykur is a great start to this album with more thrash ideas. You also get Sacred Stones, which just feels a little bit more Pantera-esque. The Devil Ranges On has this kind of boogie feel, which I really enjoy. Dagen Fer, I think I said that right, is probably the most catchy song on the album. But you also get Becoming and Step Into the Light, as well as the ending song on the album that I'm not going to say because I don't know how to pronounce it. It makes for the most consistent Volbeat album since Outlaw Gentlemen and Shady Ladies. That is a high honor because I really like that album as well. Get past your hate for Volbeat and just check this out. At number 36, we have Soen with Imperial, another band that kind of takes that Tool moniker as well, though they've kind of found their own sound over the years. It does sound kind of similar as each album goes on. I will say their previous album, Lotus, was their most diverse, and I really, really like that one. This one doesn't hit as much as the high marks. This album, though, starts off with some of their strongest work. Jumping out of the gate, having Lumerian, Monarch, Illusion, and Antagonist as 4 of your first 5 songs is a killer way of starting this album. Yeah, Fortune isn't the most interesting closer. It might be one of their weakest that they've had, just because it is a little bit heavier in terms of like weight rather than in terms of energy. The other 2 songs kind of don't really add much to that momentum, but they're still serviceable songs, and the first 5 are nearly enough to be able to make this an amazing album. Just like with a lot of their other albums, I wish that they close as well as they open, because a lot of these Soen albums, they just start with guns blazing and then kind of lose sight at the end. I would love to hear a perfectly cohesive Soen album, because trust me, Lotus was the closest, and that almost made my top 10. If they had a just consistent enough album with that, it would make top 10 for sure, potentially album of the year material. But still, hell of an album, and it's still a memorable album even though it dropped in February. Number 35, we have Adeem the Artist with Cast Iron Pansexual. This was another Crash Thompson recommendation, and this was a really interesting album. Musically, it's not like crazy original. This is a like country and folk album through and through, and it's pretty short. I think it was less than a half hour, but the song material super interesting. This particular artist, their music, it focuses more on the transgender community, and the LGBT community, and it makes for some really interesting themes that I've never really heard in popular music. I never came out talking about holding off about coming out and expressing your sexuality, especially growing up in rural America. A lot of this is about them living their life in rural America, not feeling like they could come out with how they felt. Fervent for the Hunger has a lot of really interesting imagery about God being, from what I understand, I think, a woman. And she has all these different scones to give to people, which kind of is like an imagery for like all the different types of sexual orientations out there, and just not knowing which one to pick for yourself. Apartment, a gorgeously heartbreaking song about the main character having feelings for this particular person, but this particular person has feelings for another person and another type of sexual orientation, and the main character feeling the tension of wanting to kiss this person, showing them how they feel even though the other person might not reciprocate it. It's a more updated version on the idea of falling in love with somebody but knowing that they are not into you, but wanting to show them how much you care about them. Really interesting evolution of that idea. And the last song on the album, Reclaim My Name, is also really gorgeous, about wanting to go back to the past and kind of just wanting to feel comfortable with your past self, so that way you can feel comfortable enough to be able to express your true self. A lot of this stuff, is not stuff that I am aware of as someone who isn't in the LGBT community, but it's really cool and really interesting to hear these perspectives, and the music is solid as well. It's interesting for me in terms of a lot of the LGBT, including transgender community. When I hear about music in their community, I'm usually hearing more stuff like Black Dresses, more like Sophie. We're talking about more stuff that is kind of hyper pop. I like that I can find a different genre of music that also tells these stories. Also, I would love to hear more particular artists in the LGBT communities, including the transgender community. So if you have any recommendations, please let me know, because I feel like my knowledge of transgender music is very thin, so I would love to be able to branch out. But also, of course, check this album out. It's short, sweet, and has a lot of really good messaging. Number 34, we have Spelling and the Turning Wheel. This album is drop dead gorgeous. One of the more gorgeously produced albums of 2021. This artist is one that I've checked out before, and I found her work very confusing at times. A lot of stuff that is very enchanting, but also stuff that is just weirds me out at times. And unfortunately, this one is no different. Little Deer, I think, is gorgeous. It's such a gorgeous way to open up this album. I also really enjoy Awaken the Future, Emperor with an Egg, as well as Queen of Wands and Revolution being some highlights on this album. But there's also some parts where it just feels a little bit too over the top at times. Sometimes it's her voice, sometimes it's the production that feels just a little bit weirdly eerie. I think that there's a lot of really beautiful songs and really beautiful production on here, but also it's not like absolutely perfect like other people have claimed it is. I still really enjoyed it though, and if you're looking for something a little bit zany and over the top with production, check this out. Number 33, we have Sam Fender with 17 Going Under. This album is really great in terms of a singer-songwriter album. I remember checking out Sam Fender through Hypersonic Missile. Really fun, nihilistic, tongue-in-cheek song. I talked a little bit about this on the albumtheyear.org top 50 consensus list, but this album is just really solid in its songwriting. 17 Going Under, talking about your anger as a kid and making sure that you learn those lessons early because you don't want to have that anger when you're older. Spit of You is a gorgeous and heartbreaking song about seeing yourself in your father and knowing that one day you will lose him just like he lost his mom. There's this really heartbreaking part about the father like closing the eyes of his mom and the son is watching and being like, one day I'm going to do the same to you, and that kills me. The chorus of I can talk to anyone, but I can't talk to you. It definitely brings up some memories, but it's a beautiful song. And there's a lot of really beautiful songs on here. Long way off about the instability in politics right now. The Leveler has such great energy as he's just yelling out of his mind. But then you get Mantra, which kind of like tries to take it into a more chill path. Really solid second album from this artist, and I can't wait to see what else he does. Number 32, we have Sufjan Stevens and Angelo De Augustine with A Beginner's Mind. This is back to that folky form of Sufjan Stevens that I have been missing over the last few albums. And there's a lot of really gorgeous songs on here. What's really cool about this album is these two were watching a bunch of movies and they decided to make songs based on these movies. So honestly, you wouldn't really notice from how gorgeous a lot of these songs are. They work so well together and their voices just fit so well with each other. Reach Out, the first song on the album, just like hits the ground running with its just layers of gorgeous and just how well their harmonies work together. Also, Lady Macbeth in Chains is another really solid song. Back to Oz has a kind of a more folk rock-esque vibe, but there's still a lot of beauty in that particular song. Olympus has some great power and beauty. Murder and Crime, Fictional California about Bring It On Again has some great beauty as well. And then the last two songs, Sumerian Shade and Lacrime, two of the most beautiful Sufjan Stevens songs out there. They work so well together, and it would be really cool to see them produce more work together because they just have a great vibe and just make some beautiful music. And finally, to finish up this part of the video, we have number 31, The Killers and Pressure Machine. I have not really been a big Killers fan over the years, to be honest. I've never checked out their Hot Fuzz album in full. I do like some of their singles, but I never really was a big fan. And nothing in the 2010s really did much to sell me on this band. Battleborn didn't really do much. Neither did Wonderful Wonderful. The first album that I honestly truly enjoyed was Imploding the Mirage from 2020, and it made my honorable mentions. This one, though, deserves a full spot, and this is because this is the Killers implementing their best Bruce Springsteen impersonation, and they do very well with it. The storytelling on this album is phenomenal, talking about a small town and the idea of growing up in a small town. Where have I heard that before? Sounds like John Mellencamp to me. Basically going through the ups and downs of being in a small town and never really making it out of a small town. It shows up in a lot of heartbreaking ways through the songs, but also through the voice recordings, because all these interviews come from people from a certain small town that just tell their stories and tell the stories and kind of the tribulations of being from a small town. Quiet Town, you get this first snippet of a person saying like that this is the train that takes people out of here, whether they actually leave the town or if they just leave the world. It's a heartbreaking song about dying in a small town or dying because of the small town. Runaway Horses is a beautiful ballad with Phoebe Bridgers. Really cool addition to this particular song. In Another Life is a song about marrying your high school sweetheart, but maybe finding out that it wasn't meant to be and kind of dreaming of what would have happened in another life outside of a different town. Desperate Things is not necessarily my favorite song because it is a very slow burn, but it's there for a reason because it's about abuse in a relationship and the power dynamics, especially if you're in a small town where like these things aren't necessarily brought up. And then you get Pressure Machine and The Getting By, the last two songs in the album, talking about the small town on a whole and the pressure of living in that small town. Pressure Machine, absolutely gorgeous, especially with Brandon Flowers using his falsetto on the choruses and that being mimicked by a violin on the last time around. And then you have The Getting By, which is an absolutely beautiful song. That chorus is one of the best choruses that I heard all year. It's just like a day in the life of the small town and like wanting to do the best that you can for the small town, but also feeling like sometimes it doesn't amount to anything. Overall, really beautiful album. And I hope that this is like a path that the Killers take over the years, because this more subdued sound from them works very, very well. And even still, it's only 31 on this list. So you know that the top 30 is looking to be really good. But in order for you to see that, a few things that you should be doing. One, if you like this video, give it a like. Let me know what you enjoy about it. Let me know your favorite albums from 2021 or your thoughts on some of these albums on my list. And most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. That way I know that you enjoy what I'm doing and want to see more videos like this in the future. So next time around, we'll be looking at albums 30 to 21. Until then, this is a Music Fan, and I'm signing off.